It started like any other quiet morning on my ranch. I was sipping coffee on the porch, looking out over the acres I worked hard to maintain, when I noticed something strange near the back fence: heavy machinery, dust, noise. At first I thought, maybe the county was doing some work, but as I got closer, my heart dropped. It wasn't the county, it was the HOA. Yep, the homeowners association from the neighboring community. Without a word, without permission, they had crossed the boundary and were digging right into my land. Turns out, they decided they needed a pond for their new community beautification project, and somehow thought my property was the perfect spot to start. No letters, no calls, no notice. Just bulldozers and a bunch of guys with clipboards acting like they owned the place. I tried to keep calm, but something about the way they brushed me off, like I was the one causing trouble, really got under my skin. And then, just as I was about to call the sheriff, one of their machines hit something hard. There was a loud metallic crunch, followed by this weird humming sound from under the ground. That's when it hit me. That area runs dangerously close to a state-regulated gas pipeline. I felt my stomach drop. Now everyone was panicking. Phones were coming out. People were yelling. Someone screamed to shut everything down, but it was too late. The damage was done, and the consequences weren't just legal, they were dangerous. What happened next turned my quiet life upside down and brought in everyone from the fire department to state investigators. And the best part, the HOA still tried to blame me. Stick around, because what unfolded next is a wild mix of entitlement, negligence, and a whole lot of legal trouble, and trust me, you won't believe how far they were willing to go. So here's a little background before things went completely off the rails. I've owned this ranch for over 20 years. It's not massive, but it's mine-fenced, documented, and clearly marked on every county map. The HOA. They were from a newer development that popped up a few years ago just past the ridge. Fancy homes, strict rules, and a whole lot of people who thought owning a house with a picket fence gave them authority over everyone else around them. Now, I've had minor run-ins with them before, mostly them complaining about the view from their backyards, which, to be fair, includes some of my livestock and a couple old sheds. But this, digging without permission, that was a whole new level. When I asked the foreman what they were doing, he casually said they were expanding the HOA's stormwater drainage pond. Said they got approval. I asked, from who? He shrugged and pointed vaguely toward the houses. I kept pressing him until he pulled out a printed map, one that conveniently excluded my property line entirely. They had redrawn the map to make it look like my land was part of the shared HOA space. That's when the alarm bells really started going off. Not only had they ignored private property boundaries, but they had altered official maps to justify it. And now they've damaged a state gas pipeline. Something I knew from the original deed and surveys ran dangerously close to that spot. By then, neighbors were gathering on the HOA side of the fence, whispering and pointing. A few even acted annoyed at me, like I was the one who caused this mess just by existing there. I kept thinking, who gave them the idea they could get away with this? And more importantly, what else were they hiding? Because something about this whole setup felt off. Really off, as the warning sirens started echoing in the distance. I stood there frozen, watching the HOA crew back away from the damaged spot. A couple of them were arguing, clearly realizing they'd messed up big time. I tried to warn them earlier that the area was sensitive, but no one listened. They had a mission, and apparently didn't include respecting land ownership or public safety. Soon, the fire department arrived. Then a few trucks from the state utility agency. They cordoned off the area, started checking the pipeline for leaks, and began asking questions. Real questions. I told them everything: how I woke up and found strangers digging on my land, how I'd never given permission, and how the HOA had literally altered a map. One of the inspectors raised an eyebrow when I showed him the real survey from when I bought the ranch. That was the first time I saw someone take this seriously. Meanwhile, the HOA board president finally showed up. She was dressed in a full suit, acting like this was just some minor inconvenience. She tried to smooth-talk the investigators, claiming it was a misunderstanding and that they had every reason to believe the land was part of the HOA's open space. But when I asked her point-blank where she got her information from, she hesitated. That's when I knew there was more to this than just a botched landscaping job. The craziest part? One of my neighbors who used to work in the county office quietly pulled me aside and whispered that someone had submitted updated maps. A few months back, unofficial, not logged into the public system. He said it was shady, and that if those documents were used to get HOA approval, someone was in serious trouble. But before I could ask more, one of the gas inspectors called for an emergency evacuation of the area. Whatever they hit wasn't just a surface pipe. And suddenly, it wasn't just about property lines or HOA overreach. Now, it was about safety, liability, and uncovering who was really pulling the strings behind this mess. The next few hours felt like a blur. Emergency crews sealed off the area around the pipeline while law enforcement started roping off the rest of the dig site with caution tape. My quiet ranch had turned into something out of a disaster movie. News vans even showed up, swarming the front gate like vultures, trying to get a shot of the chaos. I just stood there, feeling helpless, furious, and honestly a little scared of what they might have set in motion. The HOA president kept trying to spin the situation, insisting to anyone who would listen that the pipeline was nowhere near their dig site, even though the state's utility crew had already confirmed the breach. The tension was thick. Neighbors started whispering, some siding with me after seeing the real survey lines, others still looking at me like I was just causing trouble for their HOA. One guy even had the nerve to say, "Why don't you just donate the land? It's just dirt." That one nearly made me lose it. Then came the real kicker. One of the investigators pulled up a permit request filed weeks ago. It had my address listed as part of the project zone, but not under my name. Someone had used a fake signature to claim approval. The investigator showed it to me, and my jaw dropped. It wasn't even a good forgery, but it was enough to get the HOA moving and secure access to my land. That's when everything started to make sense. They didn't just act entitled, they had planned this as dusk settled over the ranch. I could see more state vehicles rolling in. One of them had equipment I'd never seen before. The lead inspector looked me dead in the eye and said, "If what we suspect is true, this might go a lot deeper than anyone thought." And right then, with lights flashing, people shouting, and the tension boiling over, a crew member sprinted from the dig site, waving his arms. He yelled something that stopped everyone cold. That was the moment everything changed. The crew member stumbled over his words as he ran up to the inspectors, waving a dirt-covered tablet in one hand and pointing frantically toward the trench. Everyone around us went silent, waiting to hear what he had found. Then he shouted it, "That's not just a pipeline. There's an old vault buried under there." For a second, no one moved. The inspector turned sharply and asked what kind of vault. The crew guy just shook his head, saying, "It's sealed, big, and it's not on any utility maps." The tension that had been building all day suddenly snapped into high alert. They started yelling for everyone to clear the area again. One of the emergency officials began making urgent calls, and just like that, what started as a case of HOA overreach had escalated into something even bigger, possibly federal. As I stood there trying to process it, the neighbor who had warned me earlier leaned over and whispered, "That might be one of the old Cold War utility storage sites. They were scattered through rural areas in the 60s, sometimes forgotten." I stared at him, thinking it couldn't get more insane until he added, some of those were used to store highly sensitive equipment or backup reserves for energy infrastructure. The entire property was being treated like a potential high-security zone. The media outside the gate were practically climbing each other for a headline, and the HOA members. They suddenly vanished into the background, quiet and pale, realizing they'd stirred up something way beyond their fake pond project. The lead investigator pulled me aside again, more serious than ever, and said, "This isn't just about illegal digging or property lines anymore. Whatever's down there, it could change everything about how this case is handled." And just when I thought things couldn't possibly spiral further, a black SUV with government plates rolled up the dirt road, the kind that doesn't show up unless something serious is happening. That's when I knew we weren't even close to the end of this mess. The black SUV came to a stop just past the gate, and two serious-looking agents stepped out. No logos, no greetings, just straight to business. They flashed badges so fast I couldn't even catch the names, then went right to the lead inspector. Whatever was buried on my ranch, they already knew or at least had a good guess. Within minutes, a drone was in the air, scanning the area, and specialized teams were moving in with gear I'd only ever seen in movies. Then, the moment hit. They opened up the vault. It took heavy machinery and a lot of caution, but when the lid finally gave way, everyone stepped back. Inside was a sealed metal chamber with faded markings and what looked like decades-old electrical equipment, still wired into the old state energy grid. One of the agents confirmed it was part of a Cold War-era emergency reserve power control relay hub meant to kick in during nationwide blackouts. The pipeline that ran through my property wasn't just for fuel, it was part of a dormant, but still connected emergency system. Suddenly, the scale of the HOA's mistake came into sharp focus. By digging into my ranch without permission, by altering maps and forging signatures, they had not only trespassed and damaged a gas line, they had triggered a breach into protected state infrastructure. The agents started collecting documents, taking statements, and calling in backup. By the end of the night, the entire HOA board was under investigation. Some of them were escorted out in quiet conversations, others left in silence, realizing they were in way over their heads. The fake map, the forged approval, it all traced back to one board member who had pushed the project hardest. Turns out, he was also a land developer trying to boost nearby property value by enhancing community features with that pond. But here's the twist. Just when I thought it was over, one of the agents pulled me aside. He said they found something. A Dan access log dated only 2 weeks before the digging started. Someone had already been in that vault. Not decades ago, recently, and whoever it was didn't leave a trace. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. State officials set up a temporary perimeter around the vault while they investigated the recent access logs. They wouldn't share much, but I was told it might involve an internal probe, something beyond just the HOA or local authorities. As for my land, they confirmed it would remain under my ownership and that I had done nothing wrong. In fact, I was thanked for staying calm and reporting everything as it happened. That part still feels surreal. The HOA, well, their pond project was shut down immediately. The board member who forged the documents is now facing legal action, and the entire board was dissolved pending a full review. Neighbors who once doubted me started changing their tune. Some even apologized for not believing me earlier. Funny how fast people's opinions shift once real consequences hit. They say ranch life is supposed to be simple, peaceful, and most days it is. But this whole experience reminded me how quickly that can change when people let entitlement cloud their judgment. It wasn't just about property lines or broken boundaries, it was about accountability. Aku believed they could take what wasn't theirs, twist documents, and silence anyone who stood in their way. But truth has a way of pushing through. As for the vault, No one said much since. Whatever was down there, whatever they found it's been. Kept quiet. Maybe for good reason. But I sleep easier now knowing the land is back under control and that sometimes standing your ground literally makes all the difference. So yeah, the HOA dug into my ranch for their pond and ended up hitting a state gas pipeline and unlocking something way bigger than they ever imagined. And me, I'll just be here watching the fence line a little closer. Asterisk.